Hi, in this video we're going to talk about how the SICE, the Sensitive Information Sharing Environment, uses a use case development process to solve problems. So problems are what face everybody in government and industry. How do you fix them? So we had to zero in on a process that would focus people and drill into the problem, but more than just the problem, what are the impacts and what are the solutions that come out of that? So over the course of about 18 months, a group of states, a group of utilities, companies, and electric, comms, finance, retail worked together through the SICE working group and developed a process of how to focus in and solve problems. And they call it the use case development process. So let's walk through it. So there's basically 6 components. First is the problem. You've got to know what the problem is you're trying to solve. And problems begat problems. So all of you have been in meetings where you've started talking about A and all of a sudden B, C, D, E, and F show up. So you've got to really stay zeroed in. If other things come up, you put it in the parking lot. Then you look at the impacts of that problem. Not just impacts on one organization, but everybody that's participating. Then you look at who the people that need to be involved, what information is needed, what sensitivity level is that, do you need to put around that information? Is it publicly sensitive? Is it competitively sensitive? Things like that. And then what solutions are being developed? So let's walk through this very quickly and give you an overview. So what's the problem? To clearly define the problem and get consensus on it is critical. You can't solve problems if everybody's not on the same page. So by building a consensus around this really gets everybody's head together. It develops a shared perspective, which is very important for empathy and understanding that my actions impact you, your actions may impact me. And the big thing is each problem gives birth to other problems. We've seen this happen for a long time. So you start working on one issue and it gives birth to 2 or 3 other issues that are dependent upon it. So no problem, you create a parking lot and you work those problems as separate use cases. But then you come back and you stay focused on this. So what are the impacts? Every problem impacts people differently. So understanding the cross-sector impacts is very critical to building that shared perspective and trust and unity amongst the group. So you might have one problem like a flood, and it impacts retail differently than electric, different than comms, different than housing. And everybody needs to get that big picture, kind of that big hat, so they understand the big picture. That's the whole point. And you want each sector to share how this problem impacts them, operationally, optically in the media, politically, how does it affect their morale, their culture. You want to understand that as much as people will say, because it informs kind of the ultimate solutions. You can't have a solution that doesn't meet these needs or address these impacts. So the impacts of that cross-sector impact is critical. It's probably the most important step of the whole process to building unity and trust. Next, the people. Many times you and I are going to meetings, and people in the meetings are great information sources, but they're not the decision makers. So you're not going to get a CEO or somebody to come to one of these meetings, but you want to have people that can make or influence decisions.
I actually used to work in New York City government, and so I was introduced to HC way back, probably like 2009. It was because they were helping with the Regional Catastrophic Preparedness Grant Program for the New York City OEM grant. It was for the whole region. So they were there that were kind of facilitating across the different jurisdictions. And so when I started working for CNS, I joined a meeting that was in Philly that was the multi-hazard fleet working group that the All Hazards was kind of facilitating too. It was more focused on the electric sector, but in attending those events, that's where, of course, you just kind of network, you meet other people, they start hearing about the food sector, and then eventually I went to the same meeting that Pat went to that was at the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania. So I would say that was like the immediate benefit, is just seeing that and them hearing, again, like from a private sector perspective, these meetings or these groups they can easily disband or just not have enough if people aren't engaged in it. And so it is nice to see the government partners on the other side, like really actively wanting to help. The food sector is in general just like a just-in-time cycle of order to billing to delivery. And so the earlier that we know about any type of changes, we can attempt to try and move deliveries off of that particular day. The other thing was, in one of these meetings, somebody brought up that there was some letter that was written and approved by like the director of FEMA, but it was years ago. And so the current FEMA director at the time was like, that is not valid anymore. Do not use that letter, which is helpful, right? Like don't send your drivers out with this letter and then they still kind of get ticketed, right? And so that's helpful. It's like don't have like old stuff lying around, or like really that is not an accurate letter. That's not really going to prevent you from getting stopped or anything, like, kind of on the legal grounds, what is your risk or not. And like I think it also opened up the eyes from the private sector to the public sector. Why are they doing some of this stuff? And one person that I definitely met with in this group that I continue to kind of meet on different conferences, and I think he's a great guy, is Todd Leaf. He's from the DOT side, I believe.